A bishop is an ordained or consecrated member of the Christian clergy who is generally entrusted with a position of authority and oversight within the Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, Anglican, Old Catholic and Independent Catholic churches, and in the Assyrian Church of the East. Bishops claim apostolic succession, a direct historical lineage dating back to the original 12 apostles. Within these churches, bishops are seen as those who possess the full priesthood and can ordain clergy, including other bishops. Some Protestant churches, including the Lutheran and Methodist churches, have bishops serving similar functions as well, though not always understood to be within apostolic succession in the same way. One who has been ordained deacon, priest, and then bishop is understood to hold the fullness of the priesthood, given responsibility by Christ to govern, teach and sanctify the body of Christ. Members of the faithful, priests, deacons and lay ministers cooperate and assist their bishop in shepherding a flock. The term episkopos, meaning overseer in Greek, the early language of the Christian Church, was not from the earliest times clearly distinguished from the term presbyteros, but the term was already clearly used in the sense of the order or office of bishop, distinct from that of presbyter in the writings attributed to Ignatius of Antioch, but of contested authenticity, and sources from the middle of the 2nd century undoubtedly set forth that all the early centers of Christianity recognized and had the office of bishop, using a form of organization that remained universal until the Protestant Reformation. History. The earliest organization of the Church in Jerusalem was, according to most scholars, similar to that of Jewish synagogues, but it had a council, a college of ordained presbyters. We see a collegiate system of government in Jerusalem chaired by James the Just, according to tradition the first bishop of the city. The Apostle Paul ordains presbyters in churches in Anatolia. Often, the word presbyter was not yet distinguished from overseer, as in the earliest writings of the Apostolic Fathers. The Didache and the first epistle of Clement, for example, show the Church used two terms for local church offices, presbyters and deacon. According to the view held unanimously among the Catholic writers, this does not mean that the episcopate, in the sense of the holder of the order or office of bishop, must have developed only later, or have been plural, because in each church the college of presbyter overseers did not exercise an independent supreme power. It was subject to the apostles or to the delegates. An explanation suggests that the delegates were bishops in the actual sense of the term, but that they did not possess fixed sees nor had they a special title. Since they were essentially itinerant, they confided to the care of some of the better educated and highly respected converts the fixed necessary functions relating to the daily life of the community. In Timothy and Titus in the New Testament a more clearly defined episcopate can be seen. We are told that Paul had left Timothy in Ephesus and Titus in Crete to oversee the local church. Paul commands Titus to ordain presbyters, bishops, and to exercise general oversight, telling him to rebuke with all authority. Early sources are unclear, but various groups of Christian communities may have had the bishop surrounded by a group or college functioning as leaders of the local churches. Eventually the head or monarchic bishop came to rule more clearly, and all local churches would eventually follow the example of the other churches and structure themselves after the model of the others, with the one bishop in clearer charge, though the role of the body of presbyters remained important. Eventually, as Christendom grew, bishops no longer directly served individuals individual congregations. Instead, the metropolitan bishop appointed priests to minister each congregation, acting as the bishop's delegate. Apostolic fathers. Around the end of the 1st century, the Church's organization became clearer in historical documents. In the works of the Apostolic Fathers, and Ignatius of Antioch in particular, the role of the episkopos, or bishop, became more important, or rather, already was very important and being clearly defined. While Ignatius of Antioch offers the earliest clear description of monarchical bishops, he is an advocate of monepiscopal structure rather than describing an accepted reality. To the bishops and house churches to which he writes, he offers strategies on how to pressure house churches who don't recognize the bishop into compliance. Other contemporary Christian writers do not describe monarchical bishops, either continuing to equate them with the presbyters of speaking of episcopoi in a city. Plainly, therefore, we ought to regard the bishop as the Lord himself. Epistle of Ignatius to the Ephesians chapter 6 verse 1. Your godly bishop. Epistle of Ignatius to the Magnesians 2:1. The bishop presiding after the likeness of God, and the presbyters after the likeness of the council of the apostles, with the deacons also who are most dear to me, having been entrusted with the diaconate of Jesus Christ. Epistle of Ignatius to the Magnesians 6:1. Therefore, as the Lord did nothing without the Father, either by himself or by the apostles, so neither do ye anything without the bishop and the presbyters. Epistle of Ignatius to the Magnesians 7:1. Be obedient to the bishop and to one another, as Jesus Christ was to the Father, and as the apostles were to Christ and to the Father, that there may be union both of flesh and of spirit. Epistle of Ignatius to the Magnesians 13:2. In like manner let all men respect the deacons as Jesus Christ, even as they should respect the bishop as being a type of the Father, and the presbyters as the council of God and as the college of apostles. Apart from these there is not even the name of a church. Epistle of Ignatius to the Tralesians 3:1. Follow your bishop, as Jesus Christ followed the Father, and the presbytery as the apostles, and to the deacons pay respect, as to God's commandment. Epistle of Ignatius to the Smyrnines 8:1. He that honoureth the bishop is honoured of God. He that doeth aught without the knowledge of the bishop rendereth service to the devil. Epistle of Ignatius to the Smyrnines 9:1. As the Church continued to expand, new churches in important cities gained their own bishop. Churches in the regions outside an important city were served by chorbishop, an official rank of bishops. However, soon, presbyters and deacons were sent from bishop of a city church. Gradually priests replaced the chorbishops. Thus, in time, the bishop changed from being the leader of a single church confined to an urban area to being the leader of the church as of a given geographical area. Clement of Alexandria writes about the ordination of a certain Zacchaeus as bishop by the imposition of Simon Peter Bar Jonah's hands. The words bishop and ordination are used in the technical meaning by the same Clement of Alexandria. The bishops in the 2nd century are defined also as the only clergy to whom the ordination to priesthood and diaconate is entrusted. A priest lays on hands, but does not ordain. Quote, at the beginning of the 3rd century, Hippolytus of Rome describes another feature of the ministry of a bishop, which is that of the spiritum primatus sacerdotii habet potestatum dimitta peccata, the primate of sacrificial priesthood and the power to forgive sins. Bishops and civil government. The efficient organization of the Roman Empire became the template for the organization of the Church in the 4th century, particularly after Constantine's Edict of Milan. As the Church moved from the shadows of privacy into the public forum, it acquired land for churches, burials and clergy. In 391, Theodosius I decreed that any land that had been confiscated from the the Church by Roman authorities be returned. The most usual term for the geographic area of a bishop's authority and ministry, the diocese, began as part of the structure of the Roman Empire under Diocletian. As Roman authority began to fail in the western portion of the empire, the Church took over much of the civil administration. This can be clearly seen in the ministry of two popes, Pope Leo I in the 5th century, and Pope Gregory I in the 6th century. Both of these men were statesmen and public administrators in addition to the role as Christian pastors, teachers and leaders. In the Eastern churches, laity functa entailed to a bishop's see were much less common. The state power did not collapse the way it did in the West, and thus the tendency of bishops acquiring secular power was much weaker than in the West. However, the role of Western bishops as civil authorities, often called prince-bishops, continued throughout much of the Middle Ages, bishops holding political office as well as being arch-chancellors of the Holy Roman Empire after the 9th century. Bishops generally served as chancellors to medieval monarchs, acting as head of the justiciary and chief chaplain. The Lord Chancellor of England was almost always a bishop up until the dismissal of Cardinal Thomas Wolsey by Henry VIII. Similarly, the position of kantlets in the Polish kingdom was always a bishop until the 16th century, and today, the Principality of Andorra is headed by two co-princes, one of whom is a Catholic bishop. In France before the French Revolution, representatives of the clergy, in practice, bishops and abbots of the largest monasteries, comprised the first estate of the Estates General, until the role was abolished during the French Revolution. In the 21st century, the more senior bishops of the Church of England continue to sit in the House of Lords of the Parliament of the United Kingdom, as representatives of the established Church, and are known as Lords Spiritual. The Bishop of Sodor and Man, whose diocese lies outside of the United Kingdom, is an ex officio member of the Legislative Council of the Isle of Man. In the past, the Bishop of Durham, known as a prince-bishop, had extensive viceregal powers within his northern diocese, the power to mint money, collect taxes and raise an army to defend against the Scots. Eastern Orthodox bishops, along with all other members of the clergy, are canonically forbidden to hold political office. Occasional exceptions to this rule are tolerated when the alternative is political chaos. In the Ottoman Empire, the Patriarch of Constantinople, for example, had de facto administrative, fiscal, cultural and legal jurisdiction, as well as spiritual, over all the Christians of the empire. More recently, Archbishop Macarius III of Cyprus served as President of the Republic of Cyprus from 1960 to 1977. In 2001, Peter Hollingworth, ACOBE, then the Anglican Archbishop of Brisbane, was controversially appointed Governor-General of Australia. Although Hollingworth gave up his episcopal position to accept the appointment, it still attracted considerable opposition in a country which maintains a formal separation between church and state. Episcopacy during the English Civil War. During the period of the English Civil War, the role of bishops as wielders of political power and as upholders of the established church became a matter of heated political controversy. Indeed, Presbyterianism was the polity of most Reformed churches in Europe, and had been favored by many in England since the English Reformation. Since in the primitive church the offices of presbyter and episcopos were identical, many Puritans held that this was the only form of government the church should have. The Anglican divine, Richard Hooker, objected to this claim in his famous work of the Laws of Ecclesiastic Polity, while, at the same time, defending Presbyterian ordination as valid. This was the official stance of the English Church until the Commonwealth, during which time, the views of Presbyterians and Independents were more freely expressed and practiced.